Moving on, we have our first panel discussion, which will be discussing the inaugural presentation of the Composite of Comprehensive Roadmap. The moderator for the panel will be Professor Zuzanna Olszewska, Associate Professor in Social Anthropology of the Middle East at the University of Oxford. Members will include David Loyn, a journalist, visiting senior research fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College London. Professor Saeed Hussain Eshraq, the President Forum for Coexistence and Liberation, former Deputy Minister of Education in Afghanistan, and the Chair of Working Group Drafting CCR, which will be joining us through Zoom today. Mr. Ahmed Ali Shariati, a law tutor, PhD candidate at the University of Sussex, and a member of the Forum of Coexistence and Liberation. Ambassador Nasir Ahmed, Andisha, Afghanistan's permanent representative to the UN at Geneva. And Professor Nazif Shahrani, the interim chair of the Leadership Council of Afghanistan's National Trust Movement, and the Emeritus Professor, Department of Anthropology at Indiana University, and a member of the Advisory Board of Mosaic Global Foundation. I welcome you all here to join us for the panel. Thank you.
I'll be moderating this panel, which will be the inaugural presentation of the Composite Comprehensive Roadmap. For those of you who attended this conference last year, you may remember that 6 roadmaps for the future of Afghanistan were presented, and this CCR, the Composite Comprehensive Roadmap, is a result of an attempt to find and distill the shared principles of all of those roadmaps, the things that they all had in common, the visions and the imaginings of the future of Afghanistan that were bound by common values among them all. This has been a very long and interesting process, and that is what our panelists today will be telling us about the result of this and the compilation of this Composite Comprehensive Roadmap. So our first speaker will be joining us online, and that is Professor Syed Hussain Eshraq, who is the president of the Forum for Coexistence and Liberation, the former Deputy Minister of Education in Afghanistan, and the chair of the working group that drafted this CCR. So he'll be joining us online, and I've been asked to introduce him first so that he can kick us off. So, he's online. Yes. So, Professor Eshraq, please go ahead.
Thank you. Honored ladies and gentlemen, I extend to you my thanks. I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the Global Mosaic Foundation and Mr. Zuzanna for providing this invaluable opportunity, and to the colleagues of the Joint Working Group for their constructive collaboration that have fostered meaningful synergy. Today, Afghanistan faces a profound political and institutional crisis that every aspect of collective life. Its modern institution has not emerged organically from the political culture, but were constructed within the context of political competition and have never been in harmony with nations' social and cultural fabric. This persistent disconnect has fostered autocracy and structural violence. We produced underdevelopment and brought the country to the brink of institutional collapse. The Cambridge Conference's timely response to this crisis by bringing together scholars, policymakers, and civic actors provides a platform to rethink a legitimate and sustainable future of Afghanistan, particularly through scholarly examination of paradigm shift in politics and power. Our interdisciplinary working group has examined 20 roadmaps and proposals to produce a comprehensive, integrated roadmap grounded in freedom and justice, human rights, cultural diversity, gender equality, democracy, and inclusive dialogue based on moderation and development values. Declarations and perspective from structural justice to methods of change, endogenous transformations, type of political system, and territorial cohesion have been highlighted as key points of discussion. We accept this conference to address this difference not as obstacles, but as opportunities to deepen dialogue and achieve rational compromise. A collective future can only be realized through multilateral dialogue, mutual respect, and recognition of the other principles that underpin legitimacy and diversity and the preeminence of polyphony over uniformity. The Cambridge Conference initiative tribes connected of civilizational legacy of God and without justice and harmony or fraternity with contemporary knowledge. And in this process, offering both practical and theoretical pathway aims to facilitate the construction of governance in Afghanistan. While politics and power in our time often move with serious deviation, but politics in its strict sense is the art of justice and coexistence. Reviving this principle can liberate Afghanistan from historical cycles of failure and guide toward renewed horizon of legitimacy, stability, and prosperity. Moreover, this conference is anticipated to generate innovative political literature and provide fertile ground for methodologically rigorous research, opening new vistas for thinking about Afghanistan future. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we would like to follow up with Mr. Shariati now to continue with talking about the work of the Forum for Coexistence and Liberation.
I'm fine.
Yeah,
sure.
So Mr. Ahmad Ali Shariati, our next speaker, is a law tutor and a PhD candidate in law at the University of Sussex, and he's also a member of the Forum for Coexistence and Liberation. So I'm sorry for changing the order a little bit, but
It's okay.
please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you show me how it works?
You just click it up, downwards, I think.
Okay.
No, upwards.
Do you hear me?
No, upwards.
Upward. Hello? No? Can I use yours? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Nishan Saib. It's very nice to be here. Privilege, actually, to see so many great friends. Thank you, Zuzanna. I think most of the process about how we synthesize the comprehensive roadmap for transition to a legitimate, democratic, and sustainable system of governance for Afghanistan is already explained by Nishat Saib, Ambassador Bristol, and Professor Eshraq. But first, I would like to thank Nishat Saib, the Mosaic Global Foundation, and the Cambridge Conference for facilitating this process. The synthesis roadmap that we have is the outcome of 20 different proposals and roadmaps from 20 different political parties from across the country. So this is a big achievement. And it wouldn't have been possible without the hard work and without the passion and care of Nishat Saib and his colleagues for Afghanistan. I also want to thank this panel, Ambassador Andisha, David, Professor Shahrani, and other colleagues in the working groups, an independent and competent working group who synthesized this composite, comprehensive roadmap for the future governance of Afghanistan. We call it composite because it's not the outcome of one political process. It's the outcome of 20 different political processes, which shows how inclusive it is and how it is representative of the wide-ranging population of Afghanistan and different political groups. In terms of the structure of the roadmap, Professor Eshraq and also explained most of the issues. I should mention that I speak on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of my colleagues at the Liberation and Coexistence movement, which spearheaded and lead the synthesization process and the study process for this composite comprehensive roadmap. But there are a few things that I personally studied, and since I was part of the consultation process, I want to mention about this roadmap. The process, as I told, is already explained. The first thing is the constitutional nature of this roadmap. It emphasizes on equality, liberty, justice, human dignity, and fundamental human rights. The roadmap emphasizes on constitutional principles such as separation of powers, the executive, the judiciary, a system of checks and balances, in how we control the government. But also it focuses a lot on the involvement of people, inclusive dialogue, and institutional development. Some of the core principles of any constitutional system anywhere. And I'm not saying that this composite comprehensive roadmap is a constitutional document. It is a preparation towards creating constitutional documents and showing us how we create an inclusive governance system post-Taliban in Afghanistan. The second thing I want to mention shortly about the roadmap is the procedural aspect of this document. How the roadmap addresses and charts the pathway to reaching those democratic ideals put together and set in this comprehensive roadmap. It says that we form a coordinated political structure. What does a coordinated political structure mean? It means that we conduct comprehensive dialogues across the country. We involve people, we consult with people, we involve all political parties, all civil movements, and everyone would be represented. Second, it says that we will convene an international conference internationally with our national partners and international partners to support this transition process. The role of both national partners and international partners are important. Why? Because in any developed country, in any democracy, where the role of political parties are overlooked, that country has not developed. If the United Kingdom is the United Kingdom, and USA is USA, or a lot of other good democracies in the West or in Asia, it is because of their political parties, but but their competitions differs very much in the way that unfortunately we did in Afghanistan. They compete on industrialization, on addressing climate change and other issues. Formation of the Constitutional Assembly, procedurally. So the formation of Constitutional Assembly is also very important because this assembly will work towards how to establish and constitute a transnational government. And finally, it is the constituting and establishment of the transitional government itself. So procedurally, it's a very strong roadmap. So we have a pathway. Yes, we are far away from the collapse of Afghanistan 4 years, but now we have a document. Our colleagues are working on it. We are getting ready for a transition, and hopefully we'll find a way to defeat Taliban. And that's possible. We should stay hopeful. The third issue I want to mention is, and if I spend a lot of time, please stop me.
That's okay.
The third issue I want to mention is the differences and points of discussion. In this composite, comprehensive roadmap, we found out that political parties in Afghanistan, civil movements in Afghanistan, have a lot of agreements. We agree on a lot of things. On all those democratic ideals, constitutional core principles, fundamental human rights, no one disagrees on those things. All of us love that. But in this roadmap, we found out that with all the overlapping consensus that we have, using Rawls' phrase, we also have some discontent and some points of differences. And we found 5 core differences which contain the themes of this academic conference, the Cambridge conference today. The first one is addressing the inequalities and justice approaches and the solutions to the inequalities and injustices in Afghanistan. What does justice for us mean? Why have we been a historically unequal country? How we can address inequalities in Afghanistan. So that is the first theme of difference. It engages a lot of questions of development, underdevelopment, authoritarianism, capabilities, the role of international partners, the role of our intellectuals, the role of us as a people, as a society. So this is the first theme, the first point of difference. The second one is strategies for change and fighting with the Taliban regime. Some people say that, oh, we have to negotiate, we have to make peace, we have to sign an agreement with the Taliban. We should not fight the Taliban. But we all know the Taliban, the most heinous and barbaric terrorist group in the world. So we found out, as a point of difference, that we need to think and use and employ combined approaches in our struggle against the Taliban, in our struggle against the terrorist groups. But that is subject to discussion and will be discussed in the theme of the conference, so I'm not going to engage anymore with that. The third is the role of democratic and international actors. Again, the role of our political parties, the role of our people, and the role of international partners. International cooperation and international assistance is a principally accepted norm of international law. Yes, there is so much polarization in the international community, but we have to engage our international partners, and they have to engage with us because they have a responsibility. They have a moral responsibility, they have a legal responsibility, they have an ethical responsibility. They owe us, and we have to engage with them as much as we have that responsibility in relation to our country. So this is the fourth point of contention and discussion in this conference. The third one is the type of model, of political system. In Afghanistan, we have experienced communism, the unitary state, the centralized state in the last few years. Some people say federalism is good for our country. Some people say a parliamentary system is good in our country. We found this as a point of difference in this composite comprehensive roadmap. And let me tell you, as a young Afghan man, and as a lawyer, and as someone who have worked with the Afghanistan government for 3 years as a lawyer, my own analysis and understanding is that all these different political systems in Afghanistan have been very much symbolic and performative. A semi-centralized kind of state is working in France. Parliamentarism is working in Afghanistan. Why not in Afghanistan? Why we fail in every political system? I'm sure that there will be very interesting things to hear from our friends in that panel. The last point of difference is the issue of territorial cohesion. And this is interesting for me. I was talking to my colleague last night about this. No political party in Afghanistan say we want to disintegrate Afghanistan. We want to secede from Afghanistan. We don't like our territory, our country. No one has a question about that. We all love our watan, our country. We are patriots, yeah? But we have a few territorial problems that has imposed a lot of adversity and problems on our country, on our people. We do not pay attention to those problems, but one day, if we are realistic, if we want to solve the future of our region and country, you have to pay attention to that. The panel will talk about that problem, but I will just say that that is the Durand line. Also, the flow of water from the Helmand River, for example, to Iran, because natural resources and the distribution of natural resources and the things that we have in Afghanistan is an issue as a matter of territorial cohesion and unity. Legally, we have a weak position, but I'll stop here. A few other things, I will mention it just in a minute, shortly. We should, in any kind of state structuring and state constructing a modern state in Afghanistan, we have to pay attention to the issue of climate change and environmental destruction. It should be integrated as part of any governance system in the future. Recently, we have seen the floods and inundations. Families and lives have been destroyed. And I think that should not be overlooked. The other issue I want to demonstrate is the role and nexus of institutions of religion and government and state. We have to think about this issue seriously because we have been harmed so much by so much involvement and intervention of the religious and ideological institutions in our structure, in our government structure. The Taliban is a rigid and a very bad example of that, unfortunately. We also have to think about the problem of census and unaccounted population when it comes to future governance in Afghanistan and constructing a modern state. The latest census conducted in Afghanistan was in 1979 that was stopped due to security reasons. The population of the world was about, I think, 4 to 5 billion a few years ago. The recent scientific findings I saw, it is now 8 billion. It will reach 10 billion in a few years, but 10 billion would be the ceiling. So if we were a country of 30 to 35 million population a few years ago, now we surely are a country of 50 to 55 million population. But that's not an accurate estimation. It's my gut feeling. And I just say it so. Because that's why that's important in state construction and future governance. We need food, we need employment, we need international engagement, we need to create jobs. So how we think about state construction, about the future governance? We should not think about things symbolically. The last thing that I want to mention, and I end with that, is that in any type of political structure that we want to foresee for the future of Afghanistan, we have to think about some kind of devolution of the power to local areas, to the district area, not just urban areas. I mean, people who study critical development studies, people who study, local governance and care about these things, they know the problems in Afghanistan. And I hope that we find some very good ideas in this conference. I will be here taking notes with my colleagues and friends. And your notes and remarks will be reflected, hopefully, in the development of this roadmap. One final point about the roadmap. This is an open-ended document. We have to work on it. We have to build it. If some of you have studied the history of the Federalist Papers in America, when James Madison and Alexander Hamilton were working towards the establishing constitutional principles in the United States, they were writing these Federalist Papers not for themselves, but for the people and for their oppositions, to convince them that why we want to have a constitutional system in the United States. This composite comprehensive roadmap is a big achievement. It's very important for us. And if we are thinking about Afghanistan based on the standards and norms of the 21st century, we are very laid back, unfortunately, now because of the Taliban. We have to learn from great examples. Magna Carta 800 years ago, the history of the constitutional systems in the UK. We are in a good place to learn from a lot of good people. With that, I end. Thank you so much, Nishal Saib, colleagues. It has been a privilege and an honor to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Shariati. So coming back to the previous order now, next we'll have Mr. David Loyn, who's a journalist, writer and analyst, currently a visiting senior research fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College London, but someone who's been involved with Afghanistan for decades as a journalist, as an observer, and knows the country very well. So I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you. We're all, anyone who spends any time in Afghanistan knows you're always a student. You never understand. Can you hear me? Is that working? No, it's not. Give me one that's working. Is that working? Hello? How's that?
I've just turned off.
So you just turned it off. Hello? 111? Oh, there we are. It's always good to hear Madison and Hamilton, and worth remembering that it took 10 years to get the American Constitution in the shape that it ended up. This is not going to be an easy or quick process. Let me start. So Laurie outlined with clarity the challenges in terms of the international community and their involvement in Afghanistan. And you say, Ali, they owe us. I don't think they owe you, actually. And certainly the United States, under its current leadership, does not feel it owes anybody anything. In fact, he might be coming in saying, we spent $3 trillion. Can we have our money back?
You owe them background.
Yes, we owe them. You owe them background, etc. So I think there is a real challenge, and Sir Laurie put this in diplomatic nuance. Let me put it in the simple terms of journalism, of a headline. You know, it's worse than you think. The international community does not only not care, the only thing they're interested in is engaging with the Taliban. You know, we've seen only Russia has formally recognized the Taliban. But a number of other countries, lamentably Germany, are moving towards de facto recognition in order to send back unwanted Afghan migrants. And if they can normalize relations with Afghanistan and say that Afghanistan is a normal country, despite the appalling human rights abuses, particularly for women, that we've heard so much about, and so many people in this room know about in terms of your family relationships, the appalling things that are happening. Despite that, even liberal countries like Germany are now moving towards de facto recognition. We know that most of the countries in the region already have de facto recognition, from Turkey, India, Pakistan, etc. And so, the Taliban are beginning to be normalized, and the name of the game is engagement with the Taliban. So if the international community, those countries like the United Kingdom, who talk about engagement, who talk about the UN Sinirologlu plan, which is a path towards some sort of joint inclusive government, rewarding the Taliban with certain issues if they come into talks, it takes two sides to talk. But the international community know which one side of the table is. It's the de facto authorities in Afghanistan. They don't know who's on the other side of the table. And I'd really like to congratulate Ali and Professor Eshraq's team for the work that they've done in actually moving towards something that is, recognizably a document which a number of different Afghan political parties and channels can now sign up to as a working process. There have been other attempts to do this. The Vienna process is the most mature one, and we'll hear from Wolfgang Petrich this afternoon, who's the main coordinator of the Vienna process. But even they have not, come as far, frankly, as this group have over the last year. And it's to Zuzanna Nishat's credit that you have push this process forward. And Professor Michael Semple has been really helpful in refining some of the language, as this has gone forward, so that the roadmap, that the composite plan, the CCR as it's called, that we now have, is the second draft of something which 6 months ago was really good. This second draft is really quite impressive. I think it's something that a number of different political parties and channels can sign up to. And the important thing to remember about this is, as you say, it's not the Afghan constitution, it's a preparation, your language, for a constitution. What's needed is an approach, a method. You have a vision, there's clearly a shared vision, there's some really good language in this document, which is the vision for Afghanistan, the kind of Afghanistan that people want to see. And what's now needed is an approach, a method, in order to reach the final outcome. But the final outcome is not something that can be delivered in this room or with this group. You don't have the legitimacy to write an Afghan constitution from a group outside the country. And legitimacy cannot be assumed, it needs to be earned, which is why this needs to be the widest possible tent. I really have only a few brief things to say, but that's pretty well it. This is not the final document. This is a way towards a constitution in Afghanistan, reaching a constitution. And it has in it, in this second draft, a really clear appeal to the international community to have an international conference bringing together as many different Afghan groups, political parties and channels that you could, in order to move this thing forward. And I would appeal to those countries who say that they want to have engagement with the Taliban, and yes, it is the United Kingdom I'm talking to actually support an international conference, to support that process going forward, because it's not going to be supported from outside. If it were supported by serious international players, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the European Union, then you would really have a sense of something that the world could get behind, and you could move towards returning to peace, stability and democracy in this beautiful country. Can I just finally say one thing, which is that this will involve compromise. We've heard the 5 outstanding differences. I don't think there's enough language in this document at the moment about armed resistance. I think you need to have a sentence which acknowledges the right of armed groups to take up weapons. But there's nothing in this document about how you bring the Taliban, either defeating or engaging the Taliban, bringing them to the negotiating table. And I think it's a missing link. And clearly, as you recognise, it's because 90% of what all these groups agree with is the same. But these outstanding issues are still potentially pretty thorny, and I think this is probably the most important one, and it's also one which, as we know, many international countries, UK, US in particular, are not going to be interested in a political process which engages an armed opposition, which has resistance as part of it, but they could engage in a political process which acknowledges the legitimacy of armed resistance, or some sort of language around that. So I suggest that in the next stage, you at least need to have some sense of that language. And just my final point, any political party, Afghan political party that stays outside this process, or find another one, make another one, support Vienna, whichever one it is, any Afghan political party that stays outside this process and says, we're not involved in this because our demands are non-negotiable, we have these pure demands for the kind of constitution that we want, is an obstacle. Any group that stays outside compromise at this stage in Afghanistan's history is an obstacle to progress and an obstacle to stability, in my view. Seems to be the only one that's working.
Thank you so much, David. Our next speaker is Ambassador Nasir Ahmad Andisha, who is the permanent representative of Afghanistan to the UN in Geneva. And I will hand over to him. We need that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have 10 minutes, as you say. So I'll take the first 2 minutes to go through the past 20 years. And to put just a chronology, because I know probably all of you sitting here know very well about Afghanistan, but sometimes it was better to, since we are sitting in a classroom and an auditorium, to put these things. And then the rest of the 8 minutes to tell you about this roadmap and the efforts in the past 4 years. But just before that, I would like to also join other colleagues to really appreciate the work done through this conference, Cambridge Conference, Cambridge Massoud Series Conference, and the thanks goes to the Mosaic Foundation and all those visible and invisible colleagues and friends that they put their hands together to make this conference possible. Dr. Nishat, Sir Louis Wister, and everyone who, the volunteers, friends and colleagues. As also David said, that it's so difficult at this time to get anything but a deal with Taliban to get traction internationally. So the onus was on us to make this conference possible, to bring it once again here in this very prestigious college, university. But sometimes we get very lucky also, because, you know, in terms of Afghanistan, but also international politics, the symbolism of events are very important. The chronology of events. Trump was here in this country just, you know, a day back, and he talked about Afghanistan. And now we are here in Cambridge and talking about Afghanistan. So the message which goes outside, that there is a correlation between these two things, which is not bad. So I know that that in this difficult time, it's only the Afghans themselves, the people of Afghanistan, and also the good friends we have internationally, that who really believe that Afghanistan deserves something much better than what we have right now in Kabul. So for that, you know, really thanks goes to Ambassador Louis Wister, David, Michael, Chris, Ambassador Kate, who is not here with us, and so many others who really, you know, from the bottom of their heart, they believe and they push a solution for Afghanistan in this country. So that was 1 minute. I think in terms of Afghanistan, so why we are here, you know, I wanted to say why we are here, but David, you mentioned it, that, you know, we are sitting here because we are after 15 August of 2021, and Afghanistan lost everything. So that's why, you know, we are discussing almost everything. But quickly, from 2001 till 2010-11, it was the era of war on terror. The Taliban were terrorist groups. The idea was that, you know, we get the terrorists, we defeat Al-Qaeda, we defeat this host of Al-Qaeda, and, you know, that's how the thing was. And beside that, for Afghanistan not to be the haven of terrorism again, so we have to build, as side effect of a war on terror, a modern state with institutions. So that was going on, so two things. From 2011, 10-11 till 2018, the policy shifted to degrading Taliban and some sort of, you know, a low-level peace processes to bring them in, but the idea was that we degrade the Taliban up to a level where they will join a peace process, but at the same time we'll defeat Al-Qaeda, and then we will withdraw, but also we help the Afghanistan National Security Forces to stand on their own. So that was that almost decade. And then from 2018 onward, so we had the Taliban are no more need to be degraded. They are a political group. And then we need to negotiate with them. Doha is the place. But also we have to create a peace. So the idea was everybody was focused on a peace process, which will bring some sort of end of conflict in Afghanistan, in which there will be some compromises on the ideas that we are discussing right now. The bar will be lowered on human rights, you know, on governance, on democracy, on freedom of speech, but there will be something that you know, we can live with. So that was the idea of the time, and then there was, you know, different attempts. I remember I was reading Jonathan Paul's talking to terrorists at the time. So he said you can talk to the terrorists, and he was actually involved, I think, in some consultancy too. But then. So that's the 2 minutes. So why you're telling you when 2001 happened, so we lost everything. Everything that we were, you know, assuming that there's a government, there are human rights, there is a constitution. Because now we're talking about the constitution. There was a constitution, there was human rights, there was counter-terrorism, there was security forces, investments, lots of it. So 15 August 2021 brought us back to ground zero. And after 15 August 2021, I think in one hand, the idea was that, okay, the Taliban happened, let's try to deal with them. The Taliban 0.20. And then on the other hand, a resistance started, both armed, civil, political, women, everything else. So the excuse after 2021 of not helping with the other opposition was that there is no unity of vision, there is no unity of roadmap, the oppositions are not united. So that's why we are here. So we reached where the discussion starts. Although I believe that the idea of unity, total cohesion among democratic forces is overrated. Democracy itself needs different ideas and different approaches. But of course, on the basics, on the fundamentals, there is a unity. You can take a census and put two questions. And we did this through the Antalya process last time, that there were people even from Kabul, that the sovereignty belongs to people in Afghanistan. Everybody said yes. Afghanistan's independence, freedom, and territorial integrity in the current borders is accepted. 95% said yes. So I mean, there is a cohesion, there is unique points on which everybody agrees, and as this exercise that we do here, bringing all these 20 roadmaps together, shows that there is 90, depending on how you look at it, between 90 to 95% agreement on the points. There's only 4 to 5% that Mr. Shariati has mentioned, and those are the points that it could be discussed right now, but it could be solved later on, because in any country that those differences exist. So now what we want, basically, right now, we want, also it was mentioned by several members that a legitimate and inclusive Afghanistan, which is in peace with itself. This is what also the UN roadmap says, with its neighbors, recognizing the diversity and the rights of its people and its international obligation to arrive in this vision. I think there is a vision, and this vision, I'm sure, if you again take a referendum tomorrow, free and fair, 90%, 95% of people in Afghanistan will agree with a legitimate, inclusive Afghanistan in peace with itself and its neighborhood and internationally, and respecting the rights of its own people and its international obligation, which none of them exist there. So to arrive on this, so we have three strategies, three streams, not mutually exclusive, but interrelated. Armed resistance, number one. Political and civil resistance, number two. International and regional diplomacy, including human rights diplomacy, including diplomacy through the international obligations of Afghanistan, which we do in Geneva, and through galvanizing civil support inside Afghanistan. And of course, meanwhile, trying to keep education, keep humanitarian assistance, keep some level of development in the country. So I think with doing all these three things has to go together to create enough momentum for a change in Afghanistan. Because the Taliban, as colleagues here mentioned, they are not willing. I mean, you can keep having conferences everywhere. They're not willing to talk to anyone. They're not willing to entertain any discussions, negotiations. And their logic, which very clearly they put forward, they say like, those people who are talking, which part of Afghanistan they have under their control. That's been very, very serious, very, very clear from their point of view. So I think we are addressing only a small part of an international excuse not to support Afghanistan, and that is that the oppositions are not united, there is no unity. And I know this, but we are doing it because at least that's an excuse. And we're saying, like, okay, if that's the excuse, we are trying to work on it, so there is a very good paper. So from now on, whoever says that there is not united vision, we say, look, there is a composite dialogue. And there is a composite paper, roadmap, which even if not everybody subscribed to it directly with the signature, but actually shows, if you look at all the paper, the major point of view of it. I think with this, I will stop, but now the bigger question is, which I will leave it maybe not for this forum only to solve it for all of us, is that how to put the bell around the cat snake. Who is willing, we discussed this with Michael last time here in the other college, that who is willing to sacrifice their times, the first thing, their money, their lives, and their efforts, and their family, everything, to implement this roadmap. There are few in institutions and organizations and movements they do, and the rest of us, we do it through social media. And I think there has to be a difference between people who just talk through social media and between the people who are willing to achieve this roadmap, because Taliban were actually willing to kill themselves to get to what they are right now. So, so I congratulate colleagues who work very hard to create this composite roadmap, and I think we have addressed a small bit of it, of the international excuse, but when the fruits are ripe, it will fall from the tree. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Andisha. And so our final speaker for today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Nazif Shahrani, especially because as a fellow anthropologist, it's always nice to see anthropologists out in the world doing important things. So Professor Shahrani is the interim chair of the Leadership Council of Afghanistan's National Trust Movement and an emeritus professor in the Department of Anthropology at Indiana University, and also a member of the advisory board of the Mosaic Foundation. So please, Professor Shahrani.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa bihi nasta'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I also want to thank Mosaic and Mr. Nishat for organizing this opportunity to be together again for the fourth time, I think, here at this hallowed place, Cambridge University, to talk about Afghanistan. We have heard from colleagues a lot of good ideas and a lot of good things, but I'm not as optimistic. I suppose there is a book called Hopeless but Optimistic. Those of you who know Doug Hussain know his book. One is called Funding the Enemy, and the other one is Hopeless but Optimistic about Afghanistan. That's probably as good a way of putting it as possible. My take is that we need to approach this problem more systematically with what is the issue, or what are the issues, and why, and how. Those are the three questions that we need to ask ourselves and try to see if we can come up with some kind of systematic response to the problems so that we can find solutions. The question of what of Afghanistan, of course, for internationals is very different than the perspective of Afghans themselves. For internationals, it's drugs always, migration, refugees, all of those issues that really matters to them. And for Afghanistan and Afghans, it's a question of legitimate governance. How can stabilize the country? For the last 150 years, we have not had a legitimate government. We have not had a stable government. And the story goes on in terms of political violence in the country, of how many of our leaders were assassinated while in power, and how many were forced violently out of their positions, and how many killed even after they were deposed, and so on and so on. There are a lot of problems that we, for us as Afghans, matter, and I'm not sure how much of that matters to our good friends from outside. My own take is that they're not interested, if they are, they really love to have Afghanistan destabilized, and has benefited them, our neighbors, the region, and the outsiders for varieties of reasons. And the why of that, again, is something that from perspectives differs. Why Afghanistan matters to internationals and why Afghanistan and its problems should matter to the Afghans themselves. Again, requires really systematic way of thinking about that to try to come up with some issues of why Afghanistan has been in a mess that it has been. From the very beginning, Afghanistan was created as a buffer state for internationals for a very different purpose. And I think for them it has served its purpose. It has been systematically, at least for the first, my own take always is that Afghanistan has had rented regimes, not rentier. A lot of people, in fact, confuse the rented regimes from rentier regimes. Afghanistan is not a rentier regime in the definition that it is. It's a rented regime. The governments have been rented essentially by those who place them, support them, and keep them in power, and they work until they serve their purpose, and then they let go and bring someone else, some other group. And that has been something that we need to, and because of that, there has never been a legitimate government in the country, never in my judgment. The very brief period when it was not rented was during Amanullah's regime in the 1920s. But that we know what the story of Amanullah became. Because he was not rented, he was not supported, and despite all the celebration of his reformist movement and so on and so forth, I don't think it was his reforms that got him out of the country or forced him out of power. It was not having the kind of support that other regimes had. And he had to tax his own people, and taxing created revolts and eventually kicked them out of the country. And after that, story is something that most Afghans are familiar with. I should say that in October of 2001, after the Taliban were in power for about 2 months, a group of us Afghans got together to think, what needs to be done? So we started thinking about that, and eventually that came to the creating a kind of proposal for how Afghanistan's problems should be addressed. And that's what the National Trust movement has produced. We probably were the first group of Afghans that came up with actual written up proposal on what needs to be done. We did 3 things essentially. We diagnosed what the problem of Afghanistan's political culture are. And then we proposed solutions to every problem that we diagnosed. And then we proposed on how one should go about doing this. And fortunately, we did not hold that on tight to our chests. We shared it with everybody who was willing to take a look at it. And then mushrooming of proposals came into being. Now we have more than 100 proposals from different groups, because one of the things that we diagnosed was our culture is person-centered. It's not idea-centered, it's not principle-centered, it's not proposal-centered, in fact. So every person essentially has come to have their own proposals. So our problem has become how to put these darn proposals together now. And we have attempted this in Vienna, the most perhaps promising, and hopefully Ambassador Petrish will be here this afternoon, so he can tell us more, and that is part of this process. The second one is this one. There was also one in Istanbul, and fortunately or unfortunately, I've been involved in every one of them. My attempt has been to come up. In fact, it was my proposal to Mr. Nishad 4 years ago that let's try to bring these together. And what we have done so far, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Eshraq and Dr. Eshraq and also his group. that they have tried to bring something together, and that something together is the question of essentially goals, hopes, wishes. There's a very good wish list. We Afghans are very good at our wish list, and we share those wish lists. We have always done that. This is nothing new. From monarchy to the so-called republic to communist groups, to Islamic groups, to even Taliban, share the same goal. Afghanistan, that would be prosperous, that would be stable, that would be all of those things. But the question is, how are we going to do that? And that's where those 5 differences are, which are supposedly going to be discussed. And I think this is an achievement, that we have reduced it to 5 major issues and differences which need to be discussed in the next day and a half. And I'm very hopeful. We need to focus on how. How are we going to achieve those goals that we all share? And that's going to be the toughest part. I don't think we can delay this to say, well, someone else will in the future tell us how a new Afghanistan should be based on those same common goals, which has existed for a century and a half, to put it together. We need to show the way, not make decisions, just propose alternative ways. The problem is person-centeredness of Afghanistan's politics. It needs to be moved towards value-centeredness. It moves to be moved towards principle-centeredness and vision-centeredness. The second part is the problem of inequality, which has come up. Everybody wants more. For me, for my family, for my tribe, for my language group, for my whatever. This is the problem. How can we address in a way, systematically and structurally, so that this issue becomes, resolved? And that is citizen-centeredness. We have not had, even if it's on paper, it's not in practice. And then, how do you come up with an alternative political structure that is different from Taliban? Taliban is the epitome of what Afghanistan was in Abdurrahman's time, and has come through. So how do you, names have been different, monarchy, republic, this, that, the other, but the structures have been exactly the same in the last 150 years. We need to propose a kind of political structure, system that has been tried out in other places that would bring out an alternative political culture in Afghanistan. If we don't do that, as an anthropologist, my colleague is here, we think from the bottom up. We need to think in a way that a new alternative political structure, that's why the National Trust Movement has been promoting community self-governance with a central government that shares power, that in Afghanistan's history, the entire time, central government has made constitutions, made laws, implemented those laws, and overseen those laws. You can't do these 3 things by one entity. Make the law, implement the law, and oversee the law. It's impossible. So you have to come up with, the central government needs to make the laws, but has to allow local elected governments, self-governments to implement those laws. And then central government can oversee whether those laws have been implemented or not. So we have to think, and then you can create a possibility of a legitimate relationship between central government and local people. But unfortunately, hows have not been taken into consideration in this new composite picture. We need to deal with hows as well, and with whys. The question of why and the question of how has not been. It's a question of what. What do we want? Everybody wants the same darn thing. But why do they want it, and how should we accomplish that has not been addressed. In the next day and a half, we need to address this question, focus on the question of how and why. And if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to get much further. And as far as I'm concerned, our goals have always been consistent and the same as a nation. But we have failed and how to accomplish that, and why we should, in fact, explain that. We need some explanations to ourselves and to others. Why outsiders want what they want? Why do we want what we want? And how do outsiders have accomplished what they want in relation to Afghanistan, and how we as Afghans should be undertaking certain steps so that we can accomplish what we want. What we want is really a fundamental change in the political culture of Afghanistan, how Afghanistan has been run, and why it is bringing this misery on our people, and what we need to do so that we can overcome these real problems. If our approach is not problem-oriented, that is, we diagnose what Afghanistan's problems are for the Afghans and for internationals, and what the relationship between the two are, and then go about why and how of changing that, we're not going to be able to get very far. We're going to be stuck where we have been for a very long time. So my hope is that in the next day and a half, we really try to change our approach to some extent and see if we can come up with some solutions. And the question of resistance, all of these are, of course, part and parcel of this approach. And I hope that we can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Shahrani, for those very bracing and critical words. I think it's really important to have that bottom-up perspective, and especially to highlight the importance of something as fundamental as political culture. Nonetheless, despite the potential critique, I would like to thank and congratulate all the members of the working group for the monumental work that you've done over the past year to bring this proposal together, and to be open about what work remains to be done. So I think we have approximately half an hour now for questions. I think the panelists have indicated that they'd be happy to have a Q&A now. And maybe while people are gathering their thoughts, I would like to start with a question of my own for any member of the panel, or all of you if you like, which is to ask you maybe personally or on behalf of the groups that you represent, to push you a little bit towards that question of the how. And that's the million-dollar question at this point now, isn't it? What personally do you think the next steps ought to be? We've heard a little bit about a potential conference, bringing together a large number of Afghan diasporic groups from around the world. What else can be done? What else can we all do to support you all in this process?
نهضت اعتماد ملی, or the National Trust Movement that I represent here, has a very clear proposal. It's written up, it's available. Anyone who is interested, I'll be happy to share copies with. Some of you have them. Our approach is changing essentially the political system from a centralized one. It is. One of the things that I want to mention is in the history of Afghanistan, we have had all these lower jirgas, we have had constitutional committees, commissions, and so on and so forth. They have all done the same thing. Whoever was running the show essentially got their way. In the last constitution, one of my cousins was in fact the head of the Constitutional Drafting Commission, and then also the Study Commission and blah, blah. The Constitution was drafted, fairly decent Constitution on paper, but the Constitution that was drafted by people essentially was changed after it was submitted to the president. His team essentially did what they wanted. And at the end, my cousin called me a number of times, and I have to declare this here, I suppose on personal matters, that what should I do? The Constitution we wrote has been changed by the president and blah, blah. I said, well, if you have courage, stand out and tell them what happened, and you will gain a name for yourself, and people will know what has happened. So the problem I think we're facing is this. We need to present alternative principles for a constitution, for alternative governance structure, Not that we make the decision. We need to provide something that needs to be discussed when there is a commission. If we leave it, I think whoever is going to be leading the country, they will dictate essentially as things have been. If we provide an alternative way for propose essentially, not dictate, and nobody is going to be able to dictate. We're not here to dictate. We're here to propose alternative possibilities for governance. That we need to have self-governance at the community level, from the village, from the city wards to municipalities to districts to governance and so forth. The political offices should be all elected, and shuras should be all elected, and central government should be limited to certain things. The other very important thing is that has created problems of nepotism, corruption, inequality, and so forth, is appointments. Everybody is appointed from the center. Why? Darn it. Elect political officers and recruit through committees and commissions of professional offices and departments by their own peers. And then you can reduce the problem of nepotism and corruption and selling offices and all the rest. So that principles have to be introduced that are different. This is how this country is run. It's a monarchy, but it's democratic. So form of government is not important. The principle of governance is important. How many monarchies are here in Europe? They're all decentralized and they're all democratic. We shouldn't worry about parliamentary system and monarchy, even emirate. Let the darn thing stay, but allow people to govern themselves in their own communities at all levels. And then you can bring about a change in the political culture of the country. That's what our goals are. And we also have proposals for how to go about this. I don't want to take time, but it's available. There are alternatives. But those alternatives are not in the composite road, not in the composite map, unfortunately, because those are not part of the goals. These are part of how. The how part needs to be also introduced, and in the composite roadmap. And we need to do that. That goes also for Vienna. Vienna has some of that, but not enough of it.
Can I just respond to that very quickly? I salute the work that the National Trust Movement has done. Of the 20 different roadmaps that I read to support the working group in the work that they were doing, it's easily the most mature in terms of working out the kind of country that you want to see. But there are lots of other different ways of governing. And as you humbly say, it is just one outcome. And I think pushing for outcomes, ways of governing at this stage, is going to be something which will be an obstacle on the road to the constitutional approach that I think this CCR roadmap should really focus on. I mean, of the 5, outstanding issues, justice in order to deal with inequality is something that can be generally managed. A strategy for change. I talked about that a little bit before. Fighting or negotiating, whether you acknowledge armed resistance as a factor, I think is something that certainly needs to be there. The international role, clearly, that needs to be some language around that. And territorial cohesion. I'm fascinated to hear from Ambassador Andisha that if you ask a group of Afghans, the question, actually 95% of them will accept the Durand Line, perhaps not as described as an international border, but as the accepted frontier of the country, and that feels like a really significant change. But the type of system, which is the 5th one, and Professor Shahrani has outlined with clarity the outstanding work that the National Trust Movement has done in proposing your way forward, is something which I think is absolutely, while it can be discussed, there are these different kinds of options and these are the sorts of things that this particular group would prefer. It is something for down the track, further down the road. as a sort of second order, as an outcome of the constitutional process, not the approach and method that should be taken at this stage.
I can take this one. I think quickly on this also, I think the carrot and the stake side, what we are doing here is we are looking, both in terms of the policy but also academically, of what went wrong in the past, in case of Professor Shahrani and some of us who have done studies on this past 150 years or even more, and some of them who are looking, some of us who are looking at it in the policy terms in the past 20 years, what's going wrong. I think the good thing is, when you're in exile, when you have not a lot of responsibilities to run the country, you have time to think and to look at, the mistakes and probably, prepare for the next stage, to do new mistakes. Yeah, because life, as I say, that try to enjoy while trying to fail. Okay. So, but I think the question is that then what are the possibilities of we going forward and putting this roadmaps into practice? I think one is, right now, the only one that we really push forward is looking into the international system. The underlying, basically, implementation mechanism is the UN to do something. UN should come. I mean, UN can't do its own budget right now. It's going through such a difficulty of UN 80. Look at the Secretary General is cutting right, left, and center. New York is moving to Nairobi and things like this. So if you look at all of those things, but then I think we have to say what Richard Bennett, and I was just showing that a little bit of achievement that we have right now in the Human Rights Council, inshallah, will be a creation of an independent investigative mechanism, which will go particularly for each case of violations. So not only the Taliban leaders to be indicted in ICC, which is more symbolic, but going after each and every perpetrators, because one of the issues we had in the past round of peace in Afghanistan was the issue of transitional justice. Maybe this time we are much more prepared for it. I think those are most fundamental things that the scholars also talking about, that if you put layers of snow I'm from Shamali, and there we have Salang Pass, and in Salang Pass every year when there is snow there is mud, which comes with the cars and everything, and then there is a new layer of snow and there is mud. So the snow and mud accumulates for a long time. I think this time it needs to be clear. But the fundamental question, which I will stop with that, I know there is a way to look at it, but we have to look at it. We see that Taliban are becoming very shaky. There is lots of difficulties and problems in the ranks and files. If the reports are correct, Mutaqi was detained. If the report is correct, the only friendly Abdul in Kabul is Abdul Ghani Baradar right now. Because Khair Kha and everybody else is now also been removed. Okay, Mullah Kabir is just sidelined completely. So, but that also shows that there's a lot of possibility, as Trump said, for some breaking news. But if that happens, who will police Afghanistan? Who will go to each and every police district to prevent? Where is the army? Because Taliban are not an army. We had an army, we had a police. Taliban is a group with, I think that gives them also upper hand, with maybe 100,000 very committed fighters who listens to one man. And that's why they were able. Of course, there was another enablers. I think some of the other things that we have to work beside this. You have to look at the regional, because there is the dynamic of regional and the strategic calculations in our region is shifting. With Saudi, Pakistan, with Pakistan, India, with all of these things. So that shift, this seismic shift, will probably have its own impact on Afghanistan, because the whole world and region is going through what Jawad Zarif used to call it, or many others, as the transitional period. The old system order is sort of crumbling, the new one has not been created, so we are living in this transition. And that transitional period, Afghanistan can never be done. It's always in the middle of world politics, whether it's background with exchanges, whether it's capital of internet or gender apartheid, for good or for bad. So what to do? Which countries, which new configuration of political powers can help us implement this? So we should not only rely on the UN, we should rely on in this time is bilateral interest-based rather than multilateral value-based system. So who can help us? Could it be Pakistan? Why not? Could it be, I don't know, China, India? I mean, for us, our war is very important for us. So we have to really, deal with that. But then also our security forces, they have to think of how to recollect their very capable people who have been trained for past 20 years. That if something happens, they have to be able to take, at least for the first 74 hours or 72 hours. And then, what are the other plans that you have to put together for? I think that element of pressure and at the same time being prepared for eventuality of a major crisis in Afghanistan is very important. And once we have that, then we will go with all the nice plans that we have and sit in the Loya Jirga tent and discuss it. But there have to be security to reach to the Loya Jirga tent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Shariati will respond on behalf of...
Thank you so much. I will respond on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of Professor Eshraq. I hope I'm able to represent him properly in what he may say. I was thinking, I really enjoyed listening to the responses from our esteemed panel, but I was thinking about a few fundamental issues. Amartya Sen, a lot of you I know him. He's an Indian philosopher teaching at Harvard University. He has a very interesting pamphlet, not a book, a pamphlet. It's called Capabilities, Tawan Mandi Ho. And he has a lot of literature on development. And he says that to build a country, to build a state, to build a government, to improve a society, there are a number of factors that need to be there so we can have a prosperous society. Those factors are, for example, democratic institutions. Those factors are independent press and transparent press. But in his capabilities pamphlet, he really says different things and way more different compared to other development scholars and philosophers. He says that the whole idea of development of a society depends to its human capabilities, to human freedom, how much individuals, humans in a society enjoy freedom, how is human well-being physically in terms of enjoying life, in terms of enjoying their freedoms, but also education. And these three factors are extremely important. I was looking this week at the UN Development Index, which is part of the UNDP process, and this is also created by Professor Amartya Sen. Within the UN system, we are 181 out of 181 in the world. Afghanistan in the Human Development Index, which includes healthcare, for example, government services, education, and all the spheres of our life, almost, we are 181. So if we measure our development and the future of a state and governance, and to see what's happening to our people, in 2014 we were 171. A few years back we were a bit, better, but now we are 181. So it is a really telling a story, unfortunately, about the future about the state of our country. I think, and this 4 years of banning women from education, from public participation, their deprivation from political processes, social processes, economic processes, cultural processes. I mean, if you ban half of the society, imagine tomorrow in the UK that you cannot go to work, UK will crumble, let alone any other country. So the other thing that I would want to demonstrate is the problem of state capture and group influence. One of the things that during the route map we were talking about was the problem of masses-driven democracy. We did have a masses-driven democracy, and one of my colleagues were criticizing that masses-driven democracy have created problem in Afghanistan. I said, sir, I love masses-driven democracy because I'm a Democrat. I love liberal ideas. I want Afghanistan to change. How you can say? Then he explained to me that masses-driven democracy is a problem because people follow political processes, democratic processes, but behind one person, and that's a problem in our country. And that self-centered, person-centered, as Professor Shahrani was saying, created the problem of state capture in Afghanistan. This party, this idea, this region, that region, this ideology, that ideology. We never had the opportunity to really transcend and move beyond these narrow limits and constraints and structures of our ideologies ethnical thinkings, and other problems that we have in Afghanistan. So I really hope that after the Taliban, we reshuffle the education system, we change the education system, we distinguish between the religious institutions and political institutions, and we make a modern state, and we change the future of our country. Thank you so much. Structural justice, yes, thank you.
I would like to take a slightly different point of view as an anthropologist who has actually spent time at very local level. Afghanistan, whatever Professor Sen may be saying, is in fact very democratic at the very bottom level of society. At the very village level, even city, neighborhood levels, people are not person-centered, they're community-centered. They're very much interested in the management of their own affairs. The problem in the last 150 years has been from the center to try to destroy this structure and impose itself on the local community. And as a result has created the mess that we're in, literally. What we need to do is to essentially make use of the principles that are operating at the local level and build a government from bottom up. We have never been given that opportunity because the governments are rented, they're imposed, they're given the money, they're given the means essentially for the center to impose itself on the community. If we were allowed the community self-governance, I think, and create a kind of governance system where communities govern themselves, but the center monitors them, we will have much better alternative. And I think it's not that, we're using this Western rhetoric, and I think Professor Sen is no different, and contributing to that jargon. And then we find ourselves in a condition that it doesn't meet these demands and expectations and so forth from these theoreticians. I mean, look at the reality on the community, at the bottom level, and then try to build on that. I think we will have much better possibilities. It's Taliban who is not allowing, essentially, governance from the bottom up. Or if they're doing it, they make use of masajid in the society, and through them, they change the situation to benefit themselves. We need to rethink the models, and I don't think we're as desperate as it appears. We just need the opportunity, and that opportunity has not come so far because the center has been manipulated from outside, and they have imposed themselves, and we have never had the opportunity to build from bottom up. If we were given that opportunity, we will have much better chance of developing ourselves. But unfortunately, the global power structures and other things are entirely another topic that I don't want to go there, but we can talk about it as well. Thank you. Done?
Okay, so we now have time for a few questions. We've only got about 10-15 minutes, unfortunately. We do have a question from someone on Zoom. I'm not sure if maybe the panelists feel they've already addressed this, but perhaps they can say very, very, very briefly in one or two words how to summarize this. How can we put this good speech into real practice? I think this is the big question that we're all thinking about, having heard all of these very noble visions and ideas. So how do we put this into practice? Three words from each panelist.
With international support.
Indeed. But support for the Afghan vision, not support on their own.
Totally. Afghan-owned, Afghan-led. Where have we heard those words before?
Indeed.
I think we have to, I forgot to say, we have to use all tools approach. It cannot be only international system or international friends. I think this time we have to push the wheel to run, and then the others will come. I think we'll sacrifice ourselves.
I think revolution, the first, should come from inside Afghanistan. People should continue to resist. We should rely on the people. Second, building institutions. That was my conclusion in the last things I wanted to say. That's the entire conclusion of the literature on political economy. We need to build strong institutions, but also international cooperation, international assistance, and integrating Afghanistan within the international system. We have not been integrated within the international system, even though we are a member to the UN, to the WTO, and other international organizations. We have not benefited from the international system, in addition to international assistance. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Okay, there's... I think maybe we'll take 3 questions from the floor, if you could make them as brief and specific as possible, perhaps identifying one panelist to address them to. We'll hear all the questions together and then we'll allow the panelists to respond. Yes.
I just want to start with a quick statement.
So, could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Zulfia Abawi. I'm based at the University of South Wales, originally from Afghanistan, lived in a couple of societies, working on decolonization. You'll hear more from me this afternoon. The only thing which I have a bit of a problem and is very sensitive for me is the narrative, the way Afghanistan is being introduced and talked about in a lot of the conferences. And with due respect, just a quick statement which was made in this panel was, what if America asks Afghanistan that you actually owe me for trillions of dollars? And just a quick analogy for that. Imagine it's your house. Somebody comes in because of their interest and you're just simple people. They make holes in your house in order to surveillance the neighbors who is a threat to them. And then you spend a lot of money to destroy their house for your own interest. And then you leave and then you tell them, actually, you owe me. So when it comes to the conversation about Afghanistan, let's kind of make this clear. Everybody is about their interest, if it's international community or otherwise. Like as Sir David Loyn just said, for example, Germany wants to engage with the Taliban because of their interest, because of the migration. The same thing applies to everybody. So when we are talking about Afghanistan, instead of helping Afghanistan, how can we change the narrative itself? How can we even change the semantics and the language of asking the international community, help us? It's not help us, it's rather let's all come together on the table, put our interests down and work together. And one other thing is going back to the analogy of the house, perhaps it could be a form of repent. I'm sorry, I'm coming back to help you because I destroyed your house. So that could also be a part of narrative. Thank you so much.
A question I have for David is on your how you envision your how in terms of mobilizing international support. Do you kind of envision a process? Because Afghanistan is in a situation that without an internationally mediated process, I don't think we will achieve all these good goals that we are just discussing. I mean, the future of Afghanistan. And also a question to Mr. Shariati on the process of combining all these different roadmaps. Was this a scholarly desk review or was this a genuine participatory process by the representatives of these different political parties? If so, was there any effort to merge these different parties or groups? If there is 95% overlap in what they want, why we have 20 or more different groups given the situation that we are in? Can we come up with 1 or 2 or 3 kind of comprehensive parties that can mobilize and implement aspirations in this document? Thank you.
I'm told that we're already overrunning into our coffee break, which is so very important. So I think, unfortunately, let's limit ourselves to those 2 questions, and hopefully there'll be many more opportunities for discussion throughout the day.
The question of narrative, I absolutely agree. We need to have a clear reason for the international community to have involvement, which is self-interest. And the one thing we've not really talked about this morning is terrorism. Afghanistan, you read the UN, the 6 monthly reports of the 1988 Committee of the UN, hair-curling stuff about the support for Al-Qaeda, support for 10, 20 different regional terrorist groups now based in Afghanistan, Uyghur terrorist groups. I mean, China's really worried about that. And I think it is in the international community's self-interest to support a political process to recover Afghanistan from the Taliban, because there's going to be another 9/11 or something like it. If the attack on the Crystal City Music Hall in Moscow had happened in Berlin or Paris or London, we would be in a very different situation now. But because it happened in Moscow, 150 people died from an attack planned and coordinated and financed from Afghanistan. And of course, the water's passed over its head because the international community doesn't care what happens to Russian citizens. But in terms of that self-interest, but you're absolutely right that there does need to be a narrative which is clear about the country that Afghanistan is and the reasons and causes for where we got there. In terms of how, I think what you need to get is something that is irresistible. You need to have. The Taliban succeeded because they had from 2011 they had a political status in Doha. From 2014, they're actually flying their white flag and calling themselves the Emirate. And that gave them a legitimacy in the eyes of the United States, at least, and the Trump administration last time round, to move towards negotiations. And that's what the Afghan opposition needs to move towards. This needs to be an irresistible process. And I agree with you, the 20 groups were not directly consulted in this process towards reaching some language, but that can be the next stage, because this second iteration of the roadmap of the CCR is so clear and so, I think, really as an impressive way forward that that the next stage has to be engaging them and then building the sense of a consensus, which is an irresistible. This is the Afghan political opposition. If the international community are serious about engagement with the Taliban, about negotiations, Henry Kissinger's famous question, if I want to call Europe, who do I call? And if I want to call the Afghan opposition, who do I call? Well, this process could provide that answer, in my view.
Very briefly.
Or participatory process, but at the end of the day, it is the synthesis, composite, comprehensive report of 20 different political parties. But I think what you're referring to is very necessary in the next stages, and I hope we get there soon. But we still have a relatively well-common language in this composite, comprehensive report, which will help us immensely, hopefully, in the process. We move the tall along.
I'm so sorry, but I think we're going to have to wrap up. So please join me once again in thanking our distinguished panelists and the Mosaic Foundation for enabling this process to take place.